Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our C# programming tutorial series, and in this particular video we are going to be talking about rectangular arrays. Now, what are rectangular arrays? Well, rectangular arrays are similar to normal arrays, except these have rows and columns of data rather than just a singular, like, row, you could call it, of data. A singular set of data, I guess. This has what is effectively arrays of arrays inside of it. And so we are going to I'm going to demonstrate to you how we can make these and how we can reference the various values in these arrays, as well as how we can loop through a rectangular array. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to get rid of the class program and all that, because we don't need it technically. Okay, so to start off with, we need to determine what the type of data is going to what type of data is going to be stored in this rectangular array. In this case, it's going to be integers. And so next, to tell C# that this is a rectangular array, we're going to have an opening and closing square bracket, and in between those there's going to be a comma. Okay? Next, we're going to call this numbers. And we're going to set this equal to a new int, like this, opening and closing square bracket. And then inside of these square brackets, we need to specify how many rows and how many columns there are. We want a 2x2 rectangular array, so there's going to be 2 rows, which is the first number, comma, 2, which is the columns. 2 rows, 2 columns. Just like that. And so to assign values to each of the indexes of this rectangular array, it's similar to how we went about assigning values to the different indices of a normal array. Alright. So go ahead and say numbers. And then here we can say 0, 0, equals, let's say, 1. Now, if we look inside of our error list, you can see this is, in fact, how you do it. What if I chose to do it like this instead? Left brace, 0. What if I did it like that instead? Well, if we save it and we look at our error list, this is not how you do it. We get an error. Okay, so we can just do 0, 0, like that. And we're good to go. And then we can keep doing that. So numbers 0, 1 equals 2. Numbers 1, 0 equals 3. And then numbers 1, 1 equals 4. Okay? So, remember, just like a normal array, indices are zero-based. So the first statement that we have here is 0, 0, number 0, 0. That is the first column in the first row. Numbers 0, 1 is the first row, second column. The third line is numbers 1, 0. This is the second row, first column. And then numbers 1, 1 is the second row, second column. Okay. Now it appears we may have a few errors. Okay. MBERS 1. Okay. Okay. So there we go. And now we don't have any errors. So we've now populated our rectangular array with the numbers 1 through 4. But how do we access a value from within a rectangular array then? Well, that's pretty simple. It's basically the same way that we assigned a value. We can say int x equals numbers, opening and closing parenthesis, or rather opening and closing square bracket, and then give the row index, comma, column index, and we'll say 0, 0, like that. Put a semicolon at the end, and now we have 1 stored in x. And we can see this by doing a console.writeLine x. Save the code and run it. And there it is. We have 1 printed to the console. Now, how do we loop through the array then? Well, in order to loop through the array, we need 4 different, well, not 4 different, what we need is a for loop and then a for loop within that for loop. Okay? 1 will loop through the columns, 1 will loop through the rows. So the outer one is going to loop through the rows, and then the inner one is going to loop through the columns. Okay? So, to do this, we need for int I equals 0. I is less than, and so now we run into a bit of a dilemma. We could give the value of how many rows and then how many columns, like hard code the value, or we can call get length on a rectangular array and pass it either 0 or 1. And that's the best way to do it. 0 is for the rows, and 1 is for the columns. Okay? So, where I is less than numbers dot get length 0, like that. And so that gets the number of rows. I plus plus. Like that. Now, we can go ahead and have our inner for loop for int j equals 0. J is less than numbers dot get length 1. J plus plus. Like that. Now, the numbers.getLength1, where we pass the 1 in as a parameter, that basically gets the number of columns in a row. So how many columns we've got. Now, if we want to print out all of our values, we can do a console, or rather, instead of doing this, we can do int and call this, let's say, y equals numbers, and opening and closing square brackets. Inside of the square brackets, we can put I, comma, j. Because again, I is for the rows, and then j is for columns. And then we can console writeLine y, like that. Let's go ahead and run our code now. And you can see we get 1 from our referencing the first element of our rectangular array. But now we get 1, 2, 3, 4 printed to the console because of how we're iterating through each item. We're looping through each row and each column in those rows, all in order. You can do it backwards if you so desired. So you could go from the last row and last column to the first row, first column, and it would work just the same. All right. So that pretty much does it for rectangular arrays. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video where we will talk about how we can iterate through a rectangular array with a for each loop. See you then.